Our speaker today is Dr. Jeffrey Segal. Now, I am going to start now saying Jeff because that's the only way I know Jeff. He's my old buddy from years and years and years, and we raised our kids here, the whole schmear together. So I'm just going to say Jeff from now on. And I didn't even know he was a doctor for about 5 years after I knew him. I mean, he's the kind of guy that doesn't, push that part out. But he has not only a PhD in biology, but he's the professor of anatomy and structural biology at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. So don't mess with this guy. Jeffrey's speech or address is Dr. Darwin, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Trump. So that gives you an idea of a sense of humor, I hope. Please welcome Jeffrey to the stage.
I actually, I came up with the name. It made my wife laugh. So I decided to go with it. We then watched the movie, and I realized this really has very little to do with what I'm going to talk about. There is a crazy person, there is a sane person, but of course in the movie, the crazy person is the military guy, and the sane person is Peter Sellers as the president. And so that we have a slightly different situation now, maybe. So what I'm going to talk about is sort of my continuing attempts to understand what drives our motivations and thinking. And Jim asked me, what's a good question for the day? And I will answer that conservatism wins the day. And so we'll see if you agree with me by the end of this talk. But I showed this the last time actually that I was here, and I recognized maybe 4 people from that. And so I'm going to show this video again. This is from a TED Talk from somebody whose name I've forgotten, but I think you'll all recognize it. But the point of this is actually more connected to the talk I'm giving today in terms of what the basis is for a lot of what we consider to be our ethics and morals. And so we're just going to come in the middle of this, where basically it's evaluation. This anthropologist has been looking at moral foundations in chimpanzees. And so there's a series of experiments, and we'll try this last experiment, which is quite famous.
This became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put 2 capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the 2 monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food than you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did, and I'm going to show you a little videotape of this. Recently we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is a monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens.
The task is to give a stone to the...
So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
Okay, so that's the point. You think something is fair, what's being fair, really? And so this is from a totally different species, doesn't talk to us, maybe has a little bit of ability to communicate, but nevertheless, the feeling of what's fair or not fair is very deeply ingrained into that. So we're going to have to play with this thing just a little bit to go back. Let me, all right. Let's see if this gets started. And so that's now actually something that I think is very important in learning to love your inner Trump. So there's a number of books that I've been reading that have really driven this, and the main one is really The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, right here. So that if you're interested in exploring this further, it's from 2012. It's actually been a while, and I think Bart might have talked about this book once a while ago, but again, maybe. Anyway, so there's a number of other good books. I've been very interested in evolutionary psychology for a while, just in terms of reading on my own, and so Robert Wright, Moral Animal, Why We Are the Way We Are, has been a big one for me. He's written a number of other books, and I don't think I've even read his most recent one. But another book that really, I think, has made a big impact on me in terms of my understanding of this is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's actually an economist, has won a Nobel Prize for the work that he's done in terms of what the sort of psychological underpinnings are for a lot of economic sort of forces. And so that also really ties in, and I'll mention that in a couple of places. So one thing that I think as a biologist has been very clear for me over the years is that for me, the Darwinian synthesis is a way of seeing everyday life, and once I understood about biology and evolution, I could never go back. I've never been able to think of everything we do in any other way than in terms of its biological underpinnings. And so that's really just seeing the world's diverse cultures as products of a single but very heterogeneous human nature that then responds to varying circumstances. And also then there's the potency of a very early social environment in shaping the adult mind. And so I think that's what's really important, is both what the capabilities are in the human mind, combined with some nurture as well as that inherent nature. There's only one commandment for a Darwinist, and that is, as Darwin said, if within a species there's variation among individuals and some traits are more conducive to survival and reproduction than others, those will become more widespread. Fairly simple. And so that overall the species changes with time, depending on the circumstances. Now there's different ways that you can be successful, evolutionarily speaking. You can be a single-celled organism. Off there on the left is a paramecium, single cell that swims around and eats other single cells. Or you can be a small group, as a wolf pack. That's apparently an effective way of surviving as a wolf. Or you can be a very large group, like termites, ants, bees, very large group working together. All of these are evolutionarily successful strategies. There are particular parts of the ecosystem where they fit in. So what about people? So people have elements of both of that, I think, that are synergistically working together. You both have very strong individual characteristics, which can be important, but I think what history has shown us, and evolutionarily I think it also shows that there's such distributions, group coordination can also be key, especially if it's like a Roman phalanx, as shown here. And so it's these two things together which really synergize to allow humans to basically take over most of the surface of the Earth, at our scale at least. Obviously, there are tons of bacteria, viruses, and things that we're not even aware of that actually also have taken over the Earth. So how did this happen? What is it that really drove this? And as you know, the sort of original humans, Ur-human, developed in Africa. And then there have been waves of movement out from Africa with time, starting around 100,000 years ago, perhaps. And so why are there these waves? Well, it's because the local environment becomes saturated. People start reproducing. There are too many people in one place. You start getting fighting. Somebody has to decide they're going to leave. And so, in the end, that choice has been made many, many times. Should I stay or should I go? And if you stay, then you compete locally for resources which are relatively stable and relatively well identified. So then you're really working together within a group more in order to be able to compete within that group for the well-known set of resources. Or you can leave. People who are willing to leave maybe are a bit more interested in independence. They may also be able to work as a smaller group better than in a big group. And maybe there'll be a different type of innovation that's needed. Nevertheless, these groups keep intermixing because, okay, the first group that left 5,000 years ago, guess what? There are going to be more people leaving from the original site, and they're going to be coming out, and then you're going to have competition within those new groups. So there's been a great deal of intermixing, both between those properties required of the people who stay behind, as well as those things that then were important for the people who went out and explored in new areas. So those two things have kept mixing together to generate who we are today. And 100,000 years, that's, say it's a 20-year generation time. It's about 5,000 generations, something like that, say. So 5,000 generations, or 100,000 years. Well, that's about how long it took to turn a wolf into a chihuahua. And so that's basically a fair amount of time to allow us to develop particular characteristics as well. So there's been a fair amount of time to develop subtle characteristics besides just sort of large ones. And a large part of our evolution, because we've been relatively successful in terms of taking over our ecosystems, is then been adaptation to each other in various ways, and being successful then at being able to interact with each other and pass our genes on. And so in terms of then the human psychology, I can't explain why it's turned out this way, except that a lot of this we see already in the capuchin monkeys, whether it is the particular sense of fairness or the other moral foundations that we'll get to later. These are things that actually developed before we learned to speak. And what that means, perhaps, is that this sort of scenario was pretty much bound to develop. And this is a metaphor that Jonathan Haidt, in that book, The Righteous Mind, that I mentioned at the beginning, has developed, and which I think is quite compelling. And that is that our mind consists of a very large elephant, which is our subconscious, if you want to put it in that frame. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really talk about that too much. And a rider, a very small rider, who does have a bit of a whip that they can use. And so the mind is divided, like a rider on an elephant, but the rider's job is actually mostly to serve the element and actually make up explanations for why the elephant went the way it did. And so the rider is our conscious reasoning, while the elephant is the under 99%. And an important thing that's tied to this, that I'll keep coming back to, is that the elephant also presents our intuitions and represents our intuitions, and our intuitions come first, and then our strategic reasoning will come after that, somewhat belatedly. can move on. And so this ties in now with the Daniel Kahneman book that I mentioned briefly before, The Economist. Because he has this phrased in a slightly different way, but this gives you now more of scientific underpinning, if you want, in terms of economics and human behavior. In terms of two systems, a fast system, that's the intuitive elephant system, actually. And so it operates automatically. There's no conscious effort, no sense of voluntary controls. Whatever is out there, it makes the connections immediately and pushes forward a decision. Then there's what Kahneman calls system 2, the slow one. That's the rider, that's the conscious one. That's the person who sort of is able, that's the part of our brain that actually involves conscious effort. It takes time, it takes energy. You have to have the time and energy to be able to indulge yourself in having a rider. And so that's this system 2, which is slow, is what we tend to think of as what we're feeling and thinking all the time. It's just a small rider. And so then who is really in charge? So the fast system has been really shaped by evolution. It's been shaped in many species coming up to us. They share that with us, just like the sense of fairness that's shared between all of us. And that system is what pushes us whenever we're initially confronted with a situation. And it's based on the fact that you need to decide during competition and evolution, how are things going? Is there a threat? Is there a major opportunity? Should I approach something or avoid? Is that likely to be a tiger over there? Is that likely to be food over there? How much time do I have before the tiger starts to run? Not a lot. You can't sit there and think about, well, how is the tiger feeling? Is he hungry? Should I try to feed him? That's not the point. And so basically, I think of this as emotions and instincts being things that drive us rapidly, and they're the voice of evolution speaking to us. So that if you feel attraction to somebody, how much of that do you put into words? How much of that is actually just an explanation for something that your elephant is telling you you should be doing? And then you make up a story afterwards. Conversely, or you get angry. Anger is a very useful mechanism for basically being able to short-circuit any inhibitions so that you can do what has to be done. And so these are voices that are speaking to you from evolution every waking moment. So I think I've mostly gone over that again. Consciousness takes time. The slow ones weren't around to reproduce, and it takes a lot of energy and memory. And, a lot of the time, how much does the elephant maybe care about that little whip? There's a little bit you can do, but... And so both of these systems, I think, have contributed to our evolutionary success, because right now I've emphasized something that at least for me, was the odd way of thinking about this. I think of myself as being able to control what I'm doing. I'm logical to some extent, and I decide what I'm going to do. But that's not really true. That's what this metaphor is saying, is that most of the time, we're making explanations up in our conscious minds for what we already have been told to do by our elephant. And the elephant has its own agenda, perhaps. And both of these things end up being useful, as I've sort of reiterated already. The elephant is representing an evolutionarily selected rapid response system that has been finely tuned, not over 100,000 years. That's only the time that it's been in humans. Probably over 1 million years or more. This has been a highly tuned system that says these are important things that you need to care about in order to survive. And you're going to be pushed to do these things quickly without having to think about them, because a lot of other species do that without a lot of talking about it first. On the other hand, what's really allowed us perhaps to take over the world is the fact that we don't only have this set of instincts. We also have the conscious mind. And that conscious mind can make up various stories about why the elephant decided to go off in that direction, and for a lot of the time, those stories have been not necessarily true, but to some extent they can be true, and it does have a bit of a whip. Every now and then it gets the elephant to go the other way, so that it's not just a one-way street, it is a two-way street. The main thing that is a shock to me, perhaps, is that it's kind of like parts of the Tappan Zee Bridge or whatever, where they used to shift the roadway so that most of the road is going one way and only a few are going the other way, and so that, it's not necessarily a balanced two-way street. And again, so both systems influence our behavior. Both systems are influenced by experience. And again, intuition, that's the elephant, is the fast one. It leans in one direction, and then you as the rider get to try to figure out, well, am I going in that direction? Do I want to try to change that? Am I even aware that the elephant is tilting me in that direction? And so, religions help us ride the elephant. So that's the strength of religion, I think. It's really that we feel righteous, and that righteousness is really reinforced through religion, and that's then used in a very evolutionarily successful way to enable groups of people to basically work together, fight together, and then survive. This is not a bug. And it's basically our righteous minds made it possible for human beings, not other animals, to produce large cooperative groups, tribes and nations without the glue of kinship. And there's a lot of evidence that they do help groups to cohere, solve various issues that ecologists like to talk about, and enabled people to win the competition for group-level survival. It's obvious in some sense, right? That, yes, religions have driven these wars. Guess what? That's what evolution is about. Who survives the war? And that's been that way ever since the start of life. And so that means also we're talking about the elephant being driven by religion. Logic is not the point of religion. So if I quote at the top is Darwin, religions exist primarily for people to achieve together what they cannot achieve on their own. Religious beliefs evolved by group selection, tribe competing against tribe, and the illogic of religions is not a weakness, but it's their essential strength. Because the point of a religion is to bring people together as a group. And this developed early on, before we understood where sunlight came from or whatever, so that the connections that religion uses to bind people together as a group don't need to be correct according to the most recent scientific studies, because that's just not the point. And so all these things about, having irrational practices don't need to be viewed as weaknesses. Irrational beliefs can sometimes help the group function more rationally. Sacredness binds people together and then blinds them to the arbitrariness of the practice. And groups create supernatural beings not to explain the universe, but to order their societies. And then part of that is morality, and this is another thing then that Jonathan Haidt talked about a lot, is morality both binds people together and then it blinds them. I am right, I am righteous. The morals that are driving me are the correct things. The morals that are driving this other person are wrong. And so many scientists, including myself, misunderstand religion because they ignore this principle and examine only what's most visible. And so this is maybe an example of that, to show in a very simple-minded way the effectiveness that one can have if one is talking more to the elephant and less to the rider. So this was an experiment that was done about 10 years ago and was very, you all know it, I'm sure, which is basically, if you have a coffee club where people are supposed to put money into the tin, when they take a cup of coffee or grab a donut or something that's in the group workroom, it turns out that if you have a poster of eyes somewhere in the workroom, people are 3 times more likely to actually put money in the coffee tin, right? You know, this is a picture. These are real eyes. You can just draw like 2 eyes and a smiley face. It doesn't matter. It's talking right to the elephant. And the elephant is saying, this is part of I'm in the group. The group has certain standards. I'm going to follow those group standards, even though it's just a stupid picture, right? And nowadays, of course, there could be various micro cameras around, probably are, you know, keeping track of you. But, so nonetheless, this works. This is the sort of thing that you need to think about, both in terms of how it drives you and then in terms of how you want to interact with other people. So how can we sort of understand what's going on here? And here's another great elephant analogy, of course, the blind man trying to figure out what's going on in the elephant. And so this is where we are. The writers are trying to figure out, okay, what is this thing that is actually pushing me around? And we're still trying to understand how that works. But this is some of the speculation then that Haidt has produced. And so things that elephants care about. And this will not be the same for all people, and that's what we're going to get to. So there's care/harms. They're called the various moral foundations with sort of a yin-yang for each of them. Care versus harm. You care for vulnerable children. You're sensitive to suffering. That's one of them. Fairness versus cheating is the video that we had, right? Punish free riders, people who just seem to get a grape for doing nothing more than what I did. And make us concerned about proportionality and karma. Others should get what they deserve, and I should get what I deserve. Loyalty versus betrayal, right? Creating and sustaining the group, staying part of the group. And so are others team players or not? Authority versus subversion. You follow the relationships that are in the hierarchy. Are you good with staying within that hierarchy? And what are the various ranks of various people keeping track? So is this person higher up in the hierarchy than me or not? Liberty versus oppression. So you try to keep tyrants, bullies, and alpha males, or females these days maybe, from becoming too powerful and resenting at an emotional level. So it's not something that you're thinking out. You're feeling it, right? There's all those experiments about alpha males in various troops or whatever. This is coming out right in the emotion, not in the way you think about the way things should be. And then sanctity versus degradation. What keeps you from eating something that's poisonous? How do you make sure that is something that is trafe, so that you're not going to touch something that maybe would hurt you? So which foods are safe to eat? How do you maintain clean surroundings? These are all things that we speculate. There were 7 blind men, maybe. There's 6 things here. At least one is still looking. So these are some of the ideas regarding what goes into our elephants. But not everybody has the same elephant. And so if you're thinking about liberals versus conservatives, liberals, just as you were talking here, think back about the words you were using when you were discussing things. Did you talk more about harming people, caring for people, fairness, cheating, and liberty, freedom to do what you want to do? Those are the sorts of things that liberals tend to care about. Conservatives do care about those things, but they care about other stuff as well. Loyalty, authority, and sanctity are much more important for them as well. And so this is stuff that, again, Jonathan Haidt is talking about, and which I think I agree about when I talk to the guys at the gym, for example. And so there are 2 sides of this. So one of the conclusions then is really that if you want to look for who's the most balanced individual, it's the conservatives who are the most balanced individuals. I didn't make this thing up, I just pulled it off the web as people describing this. So conservatives think maybe you might not say it's equally, but they might say it's equally about sanctity, authority, loyalty, as well as care, liberty, and fairness. So they balance all of those things. Libertarians, they're real big on liberty and being able to, and a little bit about fairness maybe. Progressives or liberals, they're big on care, they're big on liberty, they're big on fairness. A lot less about sanctity, authority, and loyalty. So it probably works. Originally, I would speculate that there was a lot more of an emphasis on authority, loyalty, and sanctity being important, especially when we don't understand the way the world works. It's more important to hold the group together because nobody really knows what the right thing to do is, and a bigger group has a better chance of surviving than an individual in a lot of different situations. On the other hand, now we're starting to understand the way the world does work. And so now it makes sense maybe to not just follow something blindly, because there might actually be a better way to do things. And so a more successful society is likely to be one that really does incorporate a wider range of elephants in its portfolio, so to speak. And so then, you know, who's an elephant whisperer here? You know, we don't know for sure, but there's a lot, and Kahneman talks about this too, that basically you decide to do something, you don't know you've decided to do it. The elephant has already decided. You just see, oh, I'm going down this path. Let me see, why am I doing this? And so that's half the time what the writer is really doing. You may think you know what you're doing, but you're about 0.2 of a second behind what your subconscious has already decided to do. And there are actually various experiments where people have been able to show that sort of thing under obviously very defined characteristics. And so this is why political arguments can be so frustrating. Moral reasons are the tail wagged by an intuitive dog, right? A dog wags his tail to communicate. You can't make the dog happy by grabbing him by the tail and wagging the tail. That is not going to make the dog happy. You know, that's just like trying to convince the rider when the elephant is the thing really moving around, not going to work so well necessarily. So you can't really change people's minds by just utterly refuting their arguments, because it's not logic that is necessarily the major driver. And so if you want to change people's minds, you've really got to understand how to talk to their elephants. So remember to ask, then, what is your elephant saying to you?